opening argument for the existence of God is what I think is the best argument for the existence of God. I also think it's a terrible argument, but still it's the best of the ones that they have. So I'm glad when they refer to it. And the idea is that you look around the world in which we live, the universe that we find ourselves in, and you say, there are features of this universe that need to be the way they are in order for life to exist. If they were different, life couldn't exist. But they easily could have been different, right? The things like the amount of energy in empty space could have been so large that it would rip planets apart before they ever formed. But we seem to have gotten lucky. We seem to find ourselves in a universe that allows for our existence. And so the argument is, I know why. It's because God did it, because God created a universe in which that's possible.
How rare actually is life in the universe? What if it is so staggeringly rare that we literally are the only life form in the entire universe? As I said, I don't think that's likely, but we can't rule it out. We have absolutely not got the knowledge, not got the information to rule out the possibility that life on this planet is literally unique. There is no life elsewhere in the universe. It does have an interesting implication. Since the number of available planets is up in the billions of billions, it would follow that if life has arisen only once, the likelihood of arising on any planet is staggeringly low, and therefore, when we on this planet speculate as chemists, more or less has to be chemists, speculate as chemists on how life on this planet might have started, we would have to be looking for a theory of the origin of life so vanishingly improbable as to qualify by the ordinary standards of human judgment as impossible. It obviously wasn't totally impossible, because here we are. We do, as a matter of fact, exist. But if this planet is the only planet that has life, then we are totally wasting our time looking for a good theory, a plausible theory, a likely theory for the origin of life. Because the theory of the origin of life that we would have to be looking for would need to be the kind of theory that we would ordinarily rule out as ludicrous, ridiculous, impossible. When I said that however improbable the origin of life might be, even if this is the only planet in the universe that has life, I was invoking the anthropic principle. I was invoking the idea that because we are here, we are alive, we are thinking about it, then however improbable the origin of life was, however improbable the origin of intelligence was, it has to have happened at least once, because here we are thinking about it. That I find actually a rather satisfying account. I don't believe it, because I think that life is much more improbable than that. But even if we are the only planet in the universe that has life, I myself am satisfied by the anthropic principle for accounting for the fact that we have life here. That's the planetary version of the anthropic principle. There is a cosmic version of the anthropic principle, which is, for some bizarre reason that I've never understood, often invoked by religious apologists who apparently don't understand that far from being a theistic argument, it is a profoundly atheistic argument. Some physicists have suggested that the universe, the laws of physics, the fundamental constants of physics, are fine-tuned in such a way as to bring us into existence. There are physicists who will tell you that if you take about half a dozen physical constants, these are constants that physicists have no explanation for, they just accept that these numbers have the values that they do, and they then do theoretical calculations using their models to say if any one of these half dozen constants was ever so slightly varied, then the universe as we know it would not be possible. For example, if the gravitational constant was a little bit different, there would be no stars, there would be no galaxies, the entire universe would just be a uniform splurge of hydrogen, for example. You wouldn't have stars, you wouldn't have chemistry, you wouldn't have the formation of the heavier elements, you couldn't have life. And they do the same trick for half a dozen other physical constants. A good example is Martin Rees, the present Astronomer Royal, in his book, Just Six Numbers. If the constants of the universe are indeed fine-tuned, how do we explain it? How do we explain the appearance that the universe is tuned to bring us into existence? Well, theists say God did it. God twiddled the knobs and tuned the physical constants to have exactly the right values. That, of course, is no explanation at all, because it leaves unexplained the tuner. It's just pushing the problem back one step. So we can instantly discount explanation number one. Explanation number two is adopted by physicists, I think Steven Weinberg, who was quoted earlier in this conference. Steven Weinberg, Nobel Prize-winning physicist from Texas, I think his view is that we don't yet understand enough physics, and when we do, when we have the longed-for theory of everything, the TOE, we will then realize that these knobs are not for tuning. There is no freedom. There are no degrees of freedom. There's only one way for a universe to be. But that might leave some people unsatisfied, because it still seems a bit uncanny that the only way for a universe to be is the way that eventually gave rise to us. The third explanation is, I think, the one that's probably favored by, oh no, there are four actually. Victor Stenger, who will be known to and greatly respected by many people here, denies that the universe is fine-tuned at all. And that's a serious point of view that we ought to not forget. But assuming that it is fine-tuned, the final idea, which I think probably most physicists at least have some time for, is the multiverse theory. This is the theory that arises out of the inflationary model of the universe, and it suggests that the universe that we know, the only universe of which we have any knowledge or any means of measuring, is a bubble in a foam of billions of bubbles, each one a separate universe, and each one having a different set of physical laws and constants. So there's a vast range of universes with different laws and constants. A tiny minority of those universes have their constants tuned in such a way that the universe lasts more than a picosecond, lasts long enough to make galaxies, lasts long enough to make stars, long enough to make chemistry, and to let the evolution of life happen. A tiny minority of universes in this bubbling foam have what it takes, and then the anthropic principle kicks in. Of that foaming bubble of all those bubbles in the foam of the multiverse, we have to be living in one of the minority of universes that has what it takes to give rise to us, because we are here. Once again, physicists find that a bit of a stretch. They find it not exactly implausible, but they think of it as a bit of a cop-out. I actually think it's rather an elegant explanation, and I think it's probably true, but I don't know enough physics to know. Yeah, I think I'll just go on to the final science fiction speculation that it's kind of rounding off this theme of the theological implications of science fiction. Another science fiction theme explored by Daniel Galloy, who is another of my favorite science fiction authors, in his third book. I can't remember the title, sorry. His idea, and it's been used by others as well, is that our world may be a gigantic computer simulation in a computer elsewhere in the universe. We are virtual creatures. We're living in a virtual world. As kind of second life, but a much bigger and better, grander second life. I don't know whether you can rule that out. It may be philosophically absurd, but even if it were true, once again we would have the regress. You cannot have complexity. You cannot have the sort of complexity to build a computer, to build a second life software to run us unless the creatures that built that computer evolved. Maybe they're also somebody else's second life, but sooner or later, regresses of that kind have to be terminated. You cannot suddenly invent complexity and intelligence. The only way to do it is to start from primeval simplicity and work up gradually. Darwin discovered one way in which you can go from primeval simplicity to prodigies of complexity, and who knows where that might end. There may be other ways. Obviously, I can't imagine what they would be, or I would have won the Nobel Prize for suggesting them. But whatever they are going to be like Darwinism, in that they are going to build progressively on primeval simplicity and work up gradually to the sort of complexity that's capable of living, that's capable of thinking, that's capable of building rockets that can go to other star systems, or that's capable of building a computer to simulate life.
The idea of this fine-tuning. This is essentially another form of pattern seeking on the basis of extremely limited evidence. Most physicists are very uncertain, as they have every right to be. In fact, I would say, for physicists, as they have the duty to be at the moment, extremely uncertain about the spatio-temporal dimensions of the original episode, the Big Bang, as it's sometimes called. We're in the very, very early stages of this inquiry. We hardly know what we don't know about the origins of the universe. We're viewing it from an unimaginable distance, not just an unimaginable distance in space. We're perched on a tiny rock in an extremely small suburb of a fairly minor galaxy, trying to look to discern our origins, but also at an unbelievable distance in time. And we claim the right to say, we can see the finger of God in this process. It's an extraordinarily arrogant assumption. It either deserves a Nobel Prize in physics, which it hasn't yet got, I notice. I don't know any physicist who believes these assumptions are necessary, or it deserves a charge of hubris. Let me make three tiny, quick objections to it as it stands, and I'm no more a physicist than most of you are. I'll make these lay objections. One, was there pre-existing material for this extra spatio-temporal being to work with? Or did he just will it into existence, the ex nihilo? Who designed the designer? Don't you run the risk with the presumption of a God and a designer and an originator of asking, well, where does that come from? Where does that come from? And locking yourself into an infinite regress. Why are there so many shooting stars, collapsed suns, failed galaxies? We can see with the aid of a telescope. Sometimes we can see with the naked eye. The utter failure, the total destruction of gigantic, unimaginable sweeps of outer space. Is this fine-tuning, or is it extremely random, capricious, cruel, mysterious, and incompetent? And have you thought of the nothingness that's coming? We know we have something now, and we speculate about what it might have come from, and there's a real question about ex nihilo, but nihilo is coming to us. In the night sky, you can already see the Andromeda Galaxy. It's heading straight for ours on a collision course. Is that part of a design? Was it fine-tuned to do that? We know that from the red light shift of the Hubble telescope, or rather Edwin Hubble's original discovery, the universe is expanding away from itself at a tremendous rate. It was thought that rate would go down for Newtonian reasons. No, it's recently been proved by Professor Lawrence Krauss, the rate of expansion is increasing. Everything is exploding away even faster. Nothingness is certainly coming. Who designed that? And that's all if before these things happen, we don't have the destruction of our own little solar system, in which already there's only one planet where anything like life can possibly be supported. All the other planets are too hot or too cold to support any life at all, and the sun is due to swell up, burn us to a crisp, boil our oceans and die, as we've seen all the other suns do in the night sky. This is not fine-tuning, ladies and gentlemen, and if it's the work of a designer, then there's an indictment to which that designer may have to be subjected. I'm out of time. I'm very grateful for your kindness and hospitality. Thank you.
I think the fine-tuning argument can sometimes backfire in a way that hasn't really been noticed by people who put it forward, and that is, if you take as an assumption, which I actually think is theologically very well motivated, that not only does God have a say in the game, if God exists, but that God has a say in setting up the rules of the game. So the way you can put that in terms of cosmology is, not only does God get to choose, in some sense, which of the universes comes about, but he actually has a say about which are more or less likely to come about. So imagine that you believe in some infinite being who designed some sort of game for you, and you believe also that this being, so I think in a paper I wrote some time ago, I actually called this being Gob. So G-O-B, just for fun. Now imagine that you, before you play the game, you think Gob really, really likes the color purple, right? So Gob really likes the color purple, hates the color yellow, wants you're going to play this game where you're going to draw a ball out of a hat, and you know this is the preference. Gob is averse to yellow, loves purple. Okay, so now you're going to play the game, but the game is to figure out who set up the game. Okay, so you're going to play, you're going to draw the balls out of the hat. Now, of course, naturally we think evidence for Gob's existence is you draw out a purple ball because Gob hates yellow, likes purple. Okay, so imagine now you're going to play the game. You reach down in, you pull out a ball, and it's purple. And you go, okay, I have a fine-tuning argument, right? Gob exists because I got a purple ball. That's evidence that Gob exists. Now, imagine you get round 2 of the game. Now you get to look inside the hat. Every ball but the one you pulled out was yellow. Every single one. Now what do you do? What's your feeling about Gob's existence? I think the obvious answer is it's a big defeater to the claim that Gob exists. But this is directly analogous to the fine-tuning argument, because what we think is we got super lucky. We pulled out the universe analogy of a purple ball, a universe in which life exists. However, we look at the landscape of possible universes, and it's an incredibly rare possibility. My reaction, which I think in that case is that's evidence against God's existence.
In other words, if God sets the probabilities for life and loves life, we should expect the probabilities for life to be high. Fine-tuning is the claim that the probabilities for life are low. Yet advocates of the argument, like Luke Barnes, claim that life would be likely given theism.
I want to do just a fast tirade on stupid design, and this will be fast. Look at all the things that just want to kill us, okay? Most planet orbits are unstable. Star formation is completely inefficient. Most places in the universe will kill life instantly. Instantly. There are people that say, oh, the forces of nature are just right for life. Excuse me. Just look at the volume of the universe where you can't live. You will die instantly. That's not what I call the Garden of Eden. All right? Galaxy orbits that we orbit once every couple 100 million years, you're bound to come close to a supernova that will wipe out your ozone layer and kill everybody on the surface who doesn't otherwise have dark skin, because your high energy rays will give you skin cancer. We're on a collision course with the Andromeda Galaxy. Gone is this beautiful spiral that we have. And of course, we're on a one-way expanding universe as we wind down to oblivion, as the temperature of the universe asymptotically approaches absolute zero. That's the universe. Then Earth, volcanoes, tsunami just killed, I think that number's higher, up 200,000 people, floods, tornadoes. None of this is any sign that there's a benevolent anything out there. And this 90% should be 99%, as was earlier noted. That's of all life that has ever lived is now extinct. Inner solar system is a shooting gallery. Comets, asteroids, duck. And look how long it took to make multicellular life. Not from the beginning of the Earth. Life happened quickly, but not multicellular life. You needed your cyanobacteria to sort of crank on the oxygen, get the oxygen budget going. Then you could have that's sort of rocket fuel for multicellular creatures. But that took 3.5 billion years. That's hardly an efficient plan with us in mind. And in human beings, this is like the most tragic of them. I don't even include here the expression of free will where people want to kill each other. I'm talking about nature killing us without the help of human beings. Aggressive childhood leukemia, hemophilia, all of this. And we so much praise about the human eye, but anyone who's seen the full breadth of the electromagnetic spectrum will recognize how blind we are. Okay? And part of that blindness means we can't see, we can't detect magnetic fields, ionizing radiation, radon. We are like sitting ducks for ionizing radiation. We have to eat constantly because we're warm-blooded. Crocodile eat a chicken a month, it's fine. Okay? So we're always looking for food. These gases at the bottom, you can't smell them, taste them, you breathe them in, you're dead. Okay? So I'm almost done. I'm sorry, I'm taking up your time here. So, and with the birth defects, most are unknown. Look at this. Others, it's like abuse and infection and stuff that human beings have something to do with. We have no idea. Oops, I pushed a button by accident, sorry. No idea. No idea. And, and birth defects are tragic. They're tragic, particularly if they happen to the family afflicted by it. And you just look at images of these aborted fetuses because of and most of these are stillborn. Others are born with a heart outside the body. And so this is all simply stupid design. And the problem is, if you look for what is intelligent, and you can find some things that are just really beautiful and really, hey, that's a clever. The ball socket of the shoulder, and a lot of things you can point to, but then you stop looking at all the things that confound that revelation. And so if I came upon a frozen waterfall and it just struck me for all its beauty, I would then turn over the rock and try to find a millipede, okay, or some kind of deadly newt, and then put that in context and realize, of course, the universe is not here for us, for any singular purpose. My favorite of all is, of course, you eat, breathe, eat, and drink through the same hole in your body, guaranteeing that some percent of us will choke to death every year, okay? Imagine if you had a separate hole for breathing and eating and talking. That would be just really cool, right? You could drink, breathe, and just talk, and you would never choke, all right? And it's not a hard request. Dolphins breathe and eat through different holes in their body. And that's a mammal. So this is like Santa Claus could bring this one. And this one, of course, my favorite of all, what's this going on between our legs, right? As you've heard, you've heard it. It's like an entertainment complex in the middle of a sewage system. No engineer would design that at all.
The teleological argument from fine-tuning, I'm very happy to admit right off the bat, this is the best argument that the theists have when it comes to cosmology. That's because it plays by the rules. You have phenomena, you have parameters of particle physics and cosmology, and then you have two different models, theism and naturalism, and you want to compare which model is the best fit for the data. I applaud that general approach. Given that, it is still a terrible argument. It is not at all convincing. I will give you 5 quick reasons why theism does not offer a solution to the purported fine-tuning problem. First, I am by no means convinced that there is a fine-tuning problem. It is certainly true that if you change the parameters of nature, our local conditions that we observe around us would change by a lot. I grant that quickly. I do not grant that therefore life could not exist. I will start granting that once someone tells me the conditions under which life can exist. What is the definition of life, for example? If it's just information processing, thinking, or something like that, there's a huge panoply of possibilities. They sound very science fiction-y, but then again, you're the one who's changing the parameters of the universe. The results are going to sound like they come from a science fiction novel. Sadly, we just don't know whether life could exist if the conditions of our universe were very different, because we only see the universe that we see. Secondly, God doesn't need to fine-tune anything. We talk about the parameters of physics and cosmology, the mass of the electron, the strength of gravity, and we say if they weren't the numbers that they were, then life itself could not exist. That really underestimates God by a lot, which is surprising from theists, I think. In theism, life is not purely physical. It's not purely a collection of atoms doing things like it is in naturalism. I would think that no matter what the atoms were doing, God could still create life.
God doesn't care what the mass of the electron is. He can do what he wants. The only framework in which you can honestly say that the physical parameters of the universe must take on certain values in order for life to exist is naturalism. The third point is that the fine-tunings that you think are there might go away once you understand the universe better. They might only be apparent. There's a famous example that theists like to give, or even cosmologists who haven't thought about it enough, that the expansion rate of the early universe is tuned to within 1 part in 10 to the 60th. That's the naive estimate back of the envelope, pencil, and paper you would do. But in this case, you can do better. You can go into the equations of general relativity, and there is a correct, rigorous derivation of the probability. And when you ask the same question using the correct equations, you find that the probability is 1. All but a set of measure 0 of early universe cosmologies have the right expansion rate to live for a long time and allow life to exist. I can't say that all parameters fit into that paradigm, but until we know the answer, we can't claim that they are definitely finely tuned. Number 4, there's an obvious and easy naturalistic explanation in the form of the cosmological multiverse. People like to worry about the multiverse. It sounds extravagant. I claim the multiverse is amazingly simple. It is not a theory. It is a prediction of physical theories that are themselves quite elegant, small, and self-contained that create universe after universes. There's no reason, no right that we have to expect that the whole entire universe looks like the conditions we have right now. But more importantly, if you take the multiverse as your starting point, you can make predictions. We live in an ensemble, and we should be able to predict the likelihoods that the conditions around us take different forms. So in cosmology papers dealing with the multiverse, you see graphs like this that try to predict the density of dark matter given other conditions in the multiverse. You do not see graphs like this in the theological papers trying to give God credit for explaining the fine-tuning, because theism is not well defined. Fifth, and most importantly, theism fails as an explanation. Even if you think the universe is finely tuned and you don't think that naturalism can solve it, theism certainly does not solve it. If you thought it did, if you played the game honestly, what you would say is, here is the universe that I expect to exist under theism. I will compare it to the data and see if it fits. What kind of universe would we expect? And I claim that over and over again, the universe we expect matches the predictions of naturalism, not theism. So the amount of tuning, if you thought that the physical parameters of our universe were tuned in order to allow life to exist, you would expect enough tuning but not too much. Under naturalism, a physical mechanism could far over-tune by an incredibly large amount that has nothing to do with the existence of life, and that is exactly what we observe. For example, the entropy of the early universe is much, 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 much lower than it needs to be to allow for life. You would expect under theism that the particles and parameters of particle physics would be enough to allow life to exist and have some structure that was designed for some reason, whereas under naturalism you'd expect them to be kind of random and a mess. Guess what? They are kind of random and a mess. You would expect under theism life to play a special role in the universe. Under naturalism you'd expect life to be very insignificant. I hope I don't need to tell you, life is very insignificant as far as the universe is concerned. Here's a photograph from the Hubble Space Telescope of a few hundred out of the hundreds of billions of galaxies in our observable universe. The theistic explanation for cosmological fine-tuning asks you to look at this picture and say, I know why it's like that. It's because I was going to be here, or we were going to be here. But there is nothing in our experience of the universe that justifies the kind of flattering story we like to tell about ourselves.
So the fine-tuning argument is based on some apparent coincidences in physics that are genuinely intriguing. And I would concede this much to it, that if there is a physically inexplicable coincidence of the fundamental constants of nature, whose values have to be precisely tuned within a wide range of otherwise available possibilities to make a complex universe possible, then this constitutes a phenomenon which very naturally invites explanation in terms of a cosmic scale designer. But I also see good reason for caution and modesty here. First, we must beware our natural tendency to see purpose in things too readily. This can make us bad judges of what is an impressive coincidence and what is not. Secondly, we only have experience of this universe. So even making sense of cosmic probabilistic claims is problematic. Our experiments and observations have a sample size of 1. and we really have no idea of the range of possible alternative scenarios. Suppose someone in the 16th century or before were trying to imagine modern physics. Thirdly, we can't rule out that some deeper explanation will be found for any apparent coincidences. For example, Guth's theory of cosmic inflation can explain some of them. Thirdly, there might be multiple universes, such as a world ensemble, an evolving sequence, or a complex of bubble universes, each with its own Big Bang and different conditions. Then it would be no surprise at all that observers have evolved only in those universes that are conducive to life. Fourthly, the physics on which this entire argument is based is young, incomplete, and radically imperfect. It's less than 100 years since general relativity and quantum mechanics, our best theories of the large and the small, were developed, and we still have no way of reconciling these with each other. String theory attempts this and speculates that the universe has 11 dimensions in order to facilitate it. But that still has a very long way to go and is widely regarded with amused skepticism by experimental physicists. Even worse, barely 30 years have passed since the existence of dark matter was corroborated, and only 13 years since dark energy was postulated. We still don't have much clue what either of these are. But analysis of the latest data from space suggests that 72.8% of the mass of the universe is constituted by dark energy and 22.7% by dark matter. That leaves only 4.56% as atomic matter, the stuff that we knew to exist prior to 1980. In short, a huge proportion of modern physics, including the results that Bill appeals to, is extremely recent and riddled with unsolved problems and anomalies. How likely is it that the physics of 100 years hence will look the same? God does not have to work within anything like the existing physical rules in order to create the universe. He can make up and impose whatever rules he likes, and know infallibly, without even having to experiment, exactly what their consequences will be. So if his main aim was to create a universe finely tuned for the development of intelligent life, one has to say that he's not been very efficient. Apparently it has taken nearly 14 billion years just to produce one species capable of relationship with him. To put that into perspective, if we think of the time since the Big Bang as a year, then the early Bronze Age was 11 seconds ago, and the life of Jesus of Nazareth barely 4.6 seconds. Moreover, according to the physics on which the fine-tune argument is based, even the entire period in which the stars and planets exist will be utterly dominated by the vastly longer period of black holes. Considering this as 1 year, the life of man on this planet would be an unimaginably tiny fraction of a picosecond. Big jumps in science have generally involved having to think of things that we couldn't have thought before. Think of quantum mechanics. Think of the bending of space in relativity theory. How likely is it that the first thing that comes to the primitive mind, namely an agent who did it, is going to be the answer to our most difficult scientific questions?
Immanuel Kant famously said, "There will never be an Isaac Newton for a blade of grass." In other words, sure, you can find some physical explanation for the motion of the planets, but never for something as exquisitely organized and complex as a biological organism. Except, of course, that Charles Darwin then went and did exactly that. We can paraphrase Dr. Craig's message as saying, "There will never be an Isaac Newton for the cosmos." But everything we know about the history of science and the current state of physics says we should be much more optimistic than that.